Hello, this is Dr. Vance. In this video, I will be reviewing how to create great examples. Specifically, I'm focusing on Mirror for Man by Clyde Kluckhohn. Many people think that examples really constitute having many details, but it's actually much more complicated than that. So I'm going to go over a few different types and levels of examples, and then actually write out some examples to illustrate this from based on Mirror for Man. So what constitutes a good example? How do we come up with one? How much detail does one put into these? These are typical questions that I get in class. So what constitutes a good example? Well, you have to have details for sure. They have to be relevant to what you're trying to claim, and they have to support your claim. So how much of this detail do you end up putting in? Well, you don't want to go overboard and talk about every little thing and describe in terms of color and taste and all your five senses, because it all boils down to what is important to the example and what is the purpose of the example. You have to remember that examples exist in the essay to support the claim. That is their job. That is what they need to do, and if you have too much detail, then it gets the reader sidetracked from what you're trying to illustrate. So in terms of types of examples and whatnot, you can have lots of data that you end up citing. You can utilize anecdotes. I mean, there are many different forms that the example takes, but really it has to do these things. It has to support that claim, it has to be relevant, and it has to provide some detail. Now, other students ask, how do I come up with such an example? Well, one way would be how we ended up reading the prompt to begin with, where we put in some ideas in the margin, in the annotation, about possible things, possible connections. So again, it boils down to what is the purpose. In that example has to tie into what claim that you're making. And that should be the guiding light in creating any kind of example. So let me give you some different types here. So the first, let's call this a level of example, and I have my little space station here. So with these sorts of examples, they're just failing because they're out in space somewhere. They're off topic. So for our particular Clyde Kluckhohn response, let's say I came up with an example. I have a cousin, and this cousin likes to cook, and he also attended the Culinary Institute of America, and he makes these fantastic, elaborate dishes for family functions. So what? Great for your cousin, or my cousin, but what does that have to do with any of the points that Kluckhohn made about biology or culture? This would be an off-topic type of response. We see these a fair amount in essays, especially if people don't understand how to write a response essay. But once they do, these become rare. The second type, these may pass. I like to call these Parrot examples, because what they do is they simply copy the author's idea and then marginally replace this. An example of this would be from Clyde Kluckhohn. If you remember the example he came up with eating rattlesnake and finding it delicious and then vomiting. Well, I could come up with 1,000 different examples like this, right? I ate this delicious food and it tasted a lot like chicken. It was a little bit greasy but long and stringy. But then I vomited once I learned that it was made from fish eyes. I just couldn't handle it. And then I make some marginal connection that this is the same as what Kluckhohn ends up discussing in his prompt. Okay, it shows that you're sort of on topic. This is about a biological connection, but this is just really vague. If you cite Kluckhohn and say it shows that biology has a connection with culture, okay, this might pass, but it will be a marginal type of development. Certainly it's better than the previous one, which is out in space somewhere and has no connection, but this is still a weak type of example. So let me go on to two other ones here. I'll concentrate first on this one. So I have my little target here. These are the examples that are on target. They expand on the author's ideas with your own. And these will be passing examples. So let me give you one here. So using the same eating of a food. I ate this delicious food, but then I vomited once I learned it was made from fish eyes. But I learned to control my vomiting reflex through frequent training and eating strange foods, which shows how one's culture can influence biology and vice versa. And I may go on and talk about this, how there's this interdependence that Kluckhohn discusses, but this interdependence can be trained in that it isn't a one-way street, and culture can dramatically affect biology. Bam. This is definitely a passing level example. It takes an idea, it fleshes this out some with some specific details about, fish eyes. We just didn't eat anything, right? It had to be a little bit disgusting. And then we talk about it. That's the main part here. We ended up talking about how this connects. How does this show anything about the Kluckhohn prompt or our ideas about biology or culture and how they mix together? The next level here, so I have my brain with a lightning bolt and a light bulb. So these are A-level captivating examples. Okay, so what are those exactly? So I want to provide here an A-level captivating example that is based initially on the eating of the fish eyes. Illustrates what an A-level captivating example is really like. And this is based on the earlier one about eating something really unappetizing. So example, eating a delicious food and then vomiting may well show Kluckhohn's biology caught in a cultural web. Second attempt, for example. So I want to show you here a possible example for something that is captivating. It's really interesting, incisive, goes well beyond simply talking about a delicious food. But that's where we're going to start, because that's where the other example started, and I want to show you how to develop one of these further. So here it goes. Eating a delicious food and then vomiting may well show Kluckhohn's biology caught in a cultural web. I once ate such a food. Then I vomited once I learned it was made from fish eyes. So far this is the same thing that we had before, right? Yet I learned to control my vomiting reflex through frequent training and eating strange foods. So exact same setup as we had in the previous ones. Let's see where this goes. Kluckhohn comments on the interdependence of culture and biology. Okay, so bringing it back to Kluckhohn. You always want to bring back your examples when you can. And my fish-eyed experience bears this out. Yet, so this is where we get into the meat of it, he doesn't account sufficiently for culture's power. Okay, so we're expanding on the claim, expanding on this. I saw an Anthony Bourdain special recently where he visited a tribe in Ethiopia who ate dung beetles after only marginally cooking them. Dung beetles live in feces, basically, of other animals. So they're pretty disgusting, but their biology had adapted, so the Ethiopian tribesmen, their biology had adapted the microbes in their intestines to tolerate this, while their culture of not having much food forced them to eat these creatures. I think we could add, in fact, something here. This shows so clearly how culture can cause biology to evolve, and that it is not just a one-way street from biology that is formed based on our organism. And then we leave this off with some pithy comment. Anthony Bourdain, however, got terribly sick. Why? Because he did not have the microbes developed over hundreds, if not thousands, of years. So I think this is a great example. It does what it's supposed to do, and it goes way beyond that. You can see the difference then. If we scroll up, the difference from there to this. I ate a delicious food, but then I vomited once, and once I learned it was made from fish eyes. So it goes back to Kluckhohn. It develops the idea. It has a further claim. That's what you want to end up with. So I ultimately hope that this brief foray into examples will help you develop your own that will go far beyond what the prompt happened to say, and have some really good and detailed support for your claims.